Today, we're looking at the players that I've drafted the most in real money best ball drafts and why I like each player so much. Best ball is a format where you draft a larger roster and have no waivers or trades during the season. Each week, your team automatically starts the highest scoring players on your team, with the format for my drafts being 1 QB, 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, and 1 flex. Despite these differences, ADP is roughly the same in best ball and regular fantasy football with only a couple of outliers. So these are still players that you should target in your fantasy drafts. So let's get into it. Now, the numbers that you're going to see accompanying each player are the total amount that I've invested into each player across all of my 13 best ball teams, the total percentage of teams that player is on, and their current ADP on Underdog Fantasy. So the first player we're going to talk about is the one that I've invested the most money into, and that's Alvin Kamara. It's becoming more and more clear that Kamara won't get suspended this season. And we're talking about a player that was the RB8 last season despite missing 4 games and seeing his reception totals almost get cut in half. Even if you think the return of Michael Thomas and Jameis Winston isn't great for Kamara, he's still Alvin Kamara. He's locked and loaded as an RB1, and you used to be able to get him in the second round of drafts, which is why he's the number 1 player here. However, ESPN recently moved Kamara to 9 overall, but even there, I think there's still value selecting him. He's the biggest steal in drafts right now. Now, apart from one other player that you'll see later, the rest of these players are going to be mid to late round targets, because regardless of my draft position, I was still able to end up with them on my roster. Whereas to get someone like Jonathan Taylor or CMC, I would have needed the first or second pick in the draft. Regardless, let's talk about the second player on this list, which is Wandel Robinson. My love for Wandel comes down completely to the position that he's playing, which is slot wide receiver for the New York Giants. With Daniel Jones under center, we have seen the slot wide receiver for the G-Men perform time and time again. It started with Sterling Shepard in 2019. In the games that both Shepard and Jones played together, Shepard averaged just under 15 points per game. In 2020, when Shepard and Jones both played, Shepard averaged 15 points per game again. And then in 2021, we see a similar thing. In games that both played, Shepard averaged 14.1 points, and that includes games in Week 3 and Week 8, where Shepard left early with only 3.6 and 6.5 points. The reason that Shepard was never amazing as a fantasy asset in those years was because he misses games every season, and that's likely to happen again this season. Now enter Kadarius Toney in 2021, who shined in the slot while Shepard was gone. In full games without Shepard, Toney averaged 12.8 points, primarily getting work out of the slot. In games with Shepard back and taking that slot role over, Toney averaged only 7 points. And that's excluding weeks 1 and 2 where Toney was active but didn't see the field. Granted, that's only a 2-game sample size, but the point remains that Daniel Jones loves the receiver that's playing the slot, whoever it is. And all signs this year point to the fact that it'll be Wandel sooner rather than later. And you're getting him extremely late in drafts. He's one of my favorite late round targets, especially in best ball. The next player is Christian Watson. Now, admittedly, it has not been a great camp for Watson. He's been hurt and losing valuable time to prove himself to Rodgers, who notoriously does not trust rookie wide receivers. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to bet that Watson's talent beats out the non-existent competition next to him on the Packers roster. And the good thing about that bet is that it cost me almost nothing to make in my drafts. The next player is someone that I love both in best ball tournaments and in regular fantasy football, because he should be a beast during the fantasy playoffs, and that's Amari Cooper. Cooper should be decent without Watson, but a stud with him. He's alone at the top of the Browns' receiving pecking order and could be a league winner when Watson returns Week 13. It's for those same reasons that I've drafted Deshaun Watson so much. He is solely here because of the tournament style of most of my best ball drafts, where late season production after advancing from your group stage is what wins you big money. In best ball, he was cheap because of the uncertainty surrounding his suspension, but if it performs like the Watson of the past, that late season production will be super valuable. Next, we have Tyler Boyd. While Boyd doesn't have the high floor that he had back in 2018 and 2019, he's still a solid option. However, predicting his big weeks in fantasy will be extremely difficult, which is why I love him in best ball. Especially because if Chase or Higgins get hurt, he immediately becomes a wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside in the weeks that they're absent. And his price tag is very cheap. Next, we have the only other first-round player to make this list, and that's Austin Ekeler. Eckler's just safe. Even if the claims that they're going to bring down his workload a little are true, you shouldn't really care. You're drafting Ekeler because of his receiving work, and that portion of his workload is completely safe. Just understand that he's not likely to have the high number of red zone touches that he did last season. Next, we have Chase Edmonds. People still don't want to give Edmonds any credit. This is a player that I said had value months ago, and nothing has changed. He's the RB1 in an improved offense with a head coach coming from Kyle Shanahan's tree, meaning that this offense is going to run the ball a lot more than you'd expect. While the Shanahan tree does mean that Edmonds won't get workhorse duties, the top running back in this offense will still provide value. We saw that last year with Elijah Mitchell, and where you're getting Edmonds in drafts is super cheap, and he has great upside as the RB1 in this offense. Next, we have a player that you should only be drafting in best ball, and that's Davis Mills. Mills is here because of how cheap he is, and in 13 games last year, he had 4 top 10 weeks, but also 6 weeks with under 9 points. He has a good strength of schedule this season, and in best ball, I get the benefit of those top 10 weeks while also avoiding those complete flops because I'm only drafting him as a QB2 for bye week fill-ins and occasional upside. Now back to a player that will actually be useful in your redraft leagues, that's Michael Thomas. Getting Michael Thomas in the middle rounds is awesome. All of the reports out of camp are that he's back to full health, and as the former wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy, he has the highest upside of all the players that he's getting drafted around. The next player is a running back that I love taking late in drafts, and that's Rashaad White. White was an amazing pass catcher in college, and I think he has a shot to steal third down work from Fournette. On top of that, if Fournette gets hurt, I think White will take over most of the work in the Bucs offense. We're going to follow up one Tampa Bay Buck with another, Julio Jones. Now, Julio is a pure best ball pick because of the weekly upside he's going to have as a boom or bust option. However, in regular leagues, it's going to be very hard to predict when Tampa Bay's receivers not named Evans and Godwin will have their boom weeks. The next player is a running back with certainly some risk, but one that you're getting pretty cheap considering what he did last season. And that's James Conner. For a player that was the running back 6 last year, Conner's going way later than you'd expect. Now, obviously, you should expect his TDs to go down, but as long as he stays healthy, he's still going to take the red zone touches in the Cardinals' high-powered offense, which means his touchdown production shouldn't drastically drop. Now, this next player is admittedly someone that has left a sour taste in my mouth, and that's Cam Akers. Now, even earlier in the offseason, there were reports coming out that the Rams' backfield will be split instead of being the workhorse style that it was in years past. And even more recently, we found out that Akers is still dealing with a soft tissue injury that's kept him sidelined for a couple weeks. But based on where you can get Akers in the draft, his upside can still talk you into taking him. He was a stud of a prospect when he came out of college, and if he can return to form, he should overtake the backfield by the end of the season, even if it does start out as a split. The last player on this list is Tyler Higbee. Like a lot of other players, Higbee's here because of how cheap he is. In best ball, I love taking 3 late tight ends with upside since the highest score is automatically started every week. And Higbee was the tight end 14 last season, but he's now being drafted as the tight end 20. In best ball specifically, he has great weekly upside as a touchdown-dependent option in the Rams offense. So those are the players that I've drafted the most in my best ball leagues. I hope you guys found this video helpful and consider drafting these players in your fantasy football leagues. Thank you.